for my last post, it's interesting actually, because my first post I made walking in the forest with Jan Havik, talking about writing and how to write that people actually read your content. For my last post, I'm here in the south of Holland, close to Rotterdam, close to the Biesbos. And it's interesting how I got here, because I'm on a boat this time, on a yacht, and the name of the yacht is Wuwei, and I'm here to talk with Michiel Soeters, who is the owner of the yacht. And I found him on LinkedIn. I found you on LinkedIn, Michiel, and I was looking actually for Wuwei. But what I found when I read your profile, because you had a post on cleaning the boat and preparing it for some new coaching work with clients on the water. And what I found is, or what really triggered me, is you are doing work on releasing our inner brake.
Yeah.
And I think that's very fascinating. And when I researched you more, I found out that you translated this book, which in English is The Shame Factor, by Stefan Polter. De Schaamtefactor in het Nederlands, in Dutch, de Schaamtefactor. And you have a company, a coaching company, Geen Man Overboord, which translates to No Man Overboard, which I think is also fitting. And I think shame is actually a big element of why we have a brake on ourselves. You've translated, I think, all these 3 books, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you have, I think, a broad understanding also about shame, and obviously a great interest in Wuwei.
Yep.
Hence the name of the boat. So I'm grateful to be here and to be talking with you today at this last episode of the 39 Ideas for Life project. It's been a great experience so far. I've connected with some amazing people and continue to do so today. So thanks so much for being here, and thanks for inviting me on the boat. It's great.
Yeah.
I think we just talked about
pleasure. Yeah.
We just talked about it, that you don't see the rocking. Perhaps you see the rocking over here, but we are actually on the water. And I'd like to start, Michiel. Perhaps you could give a short introduction on yourself. Also, why you called the boat Wuwei. I'm interested in that.
Yep.
And a bit of background about your work and what got you to doing this work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, great to have you here.
Yes.
I was really touched by the first episodes, the first 38. I didn't read them all, but I scanned them and I read a few of them word by word. And
Yep.
I think, it really fits to have this conversation together, because I feel that I connect with your work. In the 38 posts you already wrote.
Yeah.
So to introduce myself, I'm 57 years old, and
Feeling 27.
feeling 27.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. A bit depending on the time of day, but
Maybe in the mornings not so much.
yeah. But anyways, my story starts basically with the firm decision I made when I was 18, after a youth of alcoholism, my father, a lot of loss, the war, which was resonating, the Second World War,
Yes.
which was resonating in my family system. I made a firm decision. I want to lead my life from love and trust instead of fear and mistrust. And that decision, which I made in anger, related to my father and the situation at home, has become the thread along which I develop myself. And being a technician, an engineer, going to the nautical college, I wanted to go to sea.
Yeah.
I wanted to sail.
Far away.
I did, yeah, far
Yeah,
away. It was
yeah.
also an escape, I realized.
Yeah.
So I sailed for Shell tankers
Yeah.
in my college years. Later worked for a heavy lifting company, Weissmuller, in IJmuiden in the Netherlands. Traveled a lot around the world and was fascinated by people, about the way they do things, the way we make things, the way we engineer things, but also the way we relate to each other. And from this project engineering kind of work I did, I came into quality assurance. And from quality assurance for this offshore company or heavy lifting company, I got into certification of quality assurance. So I visited about 350 companies inside out. So I started with management and got to the working people's level and back again. And one of the things which fascinated me was the amount of fear in organizations and the amount of lack of trust. The fact that leaders apparently ask their people to trust them first before they are able to trust their people.
Yeah.
And I always felt it should be the other way around.
Correct. It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And I saw it didn't. And I tried to educate leaders too. But I was, what was I? 27, 28, 30 maybe. So I started my own consultancy company, trying to bridge the gap between boardroom and operations, because there was always a gap. From my consultancy company, also there it was about people, it was about educating people, and it was about this thread of trust and love instead of. And at a certain point, I sold my company to another consultancy firm because I needed to grow, but I didn't have the money, so I sold it and became part of their club for a couple of years. And then one of my customers asked me to become one of his operational directors. And I thought, well, let's step into the mud myself and try to prove that what I'm calling about leadership from love and trust.
To apply that in practice.
Yeah, let's see if I can do it in real life instead of teaching others.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing for about 2004 until 2016. I think I ran multiple companies, from small family companies to parts of multinationals. And everywhere I went, I tried to do my leadership trick, and I confronted with other leaders who always thought it was soft and soft skills and blah. So, and I persevered. My belief in that people are happier in a company where leaders are secure bases grew. And one of my big examples is Richard Branson, for instance, who is really a leader who is amongst his people at the time it's needed, and who is challenging his people but not taking over. So these type of role models always help me believe that
it could be done.
It could be done.
And it got validated by your own work.
Yeah, and at a certain point, the last company I was director of, we had to liquidate, unfortunately, for reasons not related to management, to competition. We couldn't keep up with the prices which were paid for Portuguese and Polish workers. So we had a Dutch system of labor agreements.
Yeah.
And we couldn't divide, and they could, so we lost basically. So I had to liquidate, which was a big loss. It was not my firm, but it is a big loss to liquidate a firm, and I felt that I also got into a mourning process.
Yeah.
And at that time I got acquainted with the work of George Kohlrieser. I don't know whether you know the name, but he was also in Switzerland, MIT.
Okay. Yeah.
IMD. IMD. He has a course on secure-based leadership, and I got acquainted with his work and with the idea of early childhood development being elementary for being a secure-based leader. And I thought, well, I can I can do two things, more than two, but the choice to get into a new company, become a director again, and be focused on one company with all the management around it, which in the end it's about people and not about figures for me. Or I can use my knowledge to help other leaders learn to understand how important it is to be a secure base and to work from love and trust. And that was the core, the path I took. So that's why I'm here. I'm working 5 years now as an independent leadership coach.
Yeah.
And got caught by the idea that who we are today is a result of a journey we made from birth, or maybe even before birth, but in every case from birth to today, where the first years are so elementary to who we are today, that we have to make the journey and understand ourselves in order to be able to leave shame, to leave fear, to leave mistrust and these themes behind, in order to be in another connection with our workers, our colleagues, our customers, our suppliers.
I think what happened in our early years in life also has a lot to do with what's holding us back, or what's our break. As I mentioned, that was really a trigger for me to want to reach out, because I think that many of us have the brake on and are holding ourselves back. Can you say more about this concept and where it comes from, or what makes us put the brake on or keep the brake on?
Well, I think that the idea of the brake is a metaphor for basically the adaptation we learn to have in our childhood years. So what a newborn child does is register emotionally what it thinks, or it anticipates that is needed to get the primary things he needs at that time, which is food, which is real life touching, so contact,
physical touch,
contact, and love, being seen and being able to be itself, no matter what. So unconditionally acceptance. And what happens, our parents bring their own stories, bring their own patterns, bring their own expectations, bring their own fears, their own shames, etc., which come from a family system which is long before them. So we come into this world, are born free, but are chained within the patterns our parents provide us with. And what we do in that period of 0 to about 5 years is adapt ourselves to what we think is needed, to optimize food, physical attachment, and emotional attachment. And this pattern of adapting ourselves becomes a pattern which is a survival mechanism at first, but becomes the break in our later life. So, for instance, if the child is punished for being angry, starting somewhere early because it cries a lot and is angry at its parents, or the parents think it's angry, and it is told not to be angry, and this continues in later childhood and adulthood life, then you will have an adult which is incapable of putting boundaries, because anger is needed, is healthy, in order to be able to learn to set boundaries for yourself. So the break in life for this adult will be that it will have a difficult time to set boundaries and say yes to everything, and has a difficult time saying no. So the break today is a break which was a survival mechanism at first. But nobody helped us to transform the survival mechanism into a force, or to diminish it.
Turning it into a force, so something that serves us instead of holds us back.
And unconsciously it does in a lot of cases. A lot of leaders have come where they are because of their survival mechanism,
Yeah.
which is basically
Yeah.
based on shame
Yes.
and the need, or their internalized idea of the need that they have to prove themselves towards their father.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm an example as well. My father once said to me, "You are no good and nothing will come of you," which was something as a 14-year-old you don't want to hear from your father.
Yeah.
And he meant it.
Yeah.
This was his belief at that time.
Yeah.
So what I did unconsciously is start proving to him that something was going to happen. So when I was director of Heroes, one of the largest fencing companies in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
he was dead, and I didn't see him after my 20s. So we lost contact. But in the end, I discovered that it wasn't myself I was proving that I was good enough. No,
proving to your
I was
father.
still,
Yeah.
Daddy, see me, I'm good enough.
Yeah.
You said nothing would come from
Yeah.
me, but now I'm director of a big firm, $35 million euro firm.
Yeah.
So what do you mean nothing came of you?
Yeah.
But it cost me a lot. It cost me a marriage.
Yeah.
It cost me my health. It cost me a lot of sleep. So
Yeah.
it made me an anxious person who was afraid of being, seen as an imposter, because I was still thinking I was not good enough. My shame cycle was constantly triggered.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of leaders have turned this survival mechanism, and I know quite a few who did unconsciously, also followed the idea of their father working ethos, and have become where they are, which is very admirable. But still, as a result,
I mean, Donald Trump
the
is,
energy. Oh yeah.
is a great example
Yeah.
of this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think shame and fear, and they're obviously related. They're two big driving forces that result in us keeping the brake on.
Mm-hmm.
What other variables are there aside from shame and fear that typically cause us to hold the brake?
Insufficient connection with others. So.
Yeah.
And this is all also interrelated with shame and
Yes.
fear.
Yeah.
But basically, we're a social person. We need secure bases in our life, and what we see is in our early years we attach to caregivers, and the attachment. Long time people thought that you needed the attachment until you left the house and started your own life.
Yeah.
But it appears that is not true. That we always need secure bases.
Yeah.
So we need emotional connections to people who are, on the one hand, giving us safety in the sense that we are allowed to be who we are with everything that's there, our fears and our pains, etc.,
Yeah.
without being judged.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, dare us to step back in the world.
Yeah.
So a secure base is a caring and daring person who gives us inspiration to make a step forward again. A leader, from my point of view, should be a secure base as well for his people,
Yeah.
unless he wants a successful company.
Yeah.
But being able to connect yourself to others on an emotional level is essential for us as human beings. If we don't, we die,
Yes.
or we die earlier.
Yeah. But in order to connect with others, we talked about trust prior, where leaders are expecting trust to receive trust from others without giving trust first. That doesn't work. I think similarly, for us to connect with others and to build this secure base, we have to give first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a paradox there, because at the same time there's the fear and the shame that
Yeah.
holds us back.
Yeah. And there we go back to the attachment history again.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, have we learned to be resilient or not? So resilience is about learning to fall and to get up again.
Yes.
And learning and experiencing that falling is not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And falling is not, or failing is not a reason why we are rejected. But if we learn in our early years that failure is related to rejection,
Yeah.
then resilience is far away.
Yeah.
So I think that the amount of resilience we build in our early years determines in large part the ease with which we dare to connect to others.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that we dare to be rejected or
Yeah.
to risk being rejected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it is also about taking risk.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the breaks we can experience if we come from a family system where risks are being avoided.
Yeah.
It may become very difficult to take risks, and risk is not daring to sail a boat like this on in a stormy weather. No, risk is about being emotionally capable of taking risk. So telling somebody what you really feel, that you are angry, beyond the point where you are afraid to be rejected. So
Yeah.
it's about taking emotional risks mainly.
Yeah.
And this is also one of the 5 reasons why leaders fail, not taking any emotional risk. So not being able to reach out to people with the true story, not being able to reach out with their own vulnerability, not reaching out in trust or in, well, also daring to say, well, you know, I have difficulty trusting you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this, because I need to be able to trust you, but I
Yeah.
feel that it's not working.
Addressing the elephant in the room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. That's
Yeah.
what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that can be one of the big breaks as well.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very true and very recognizable. I'd love to touch on shame.
Hmm.
Can you share more about how shame influences our life and our work and where it comes from, and obviously, because that's what everyone is interested in, how we can free ourselves from it and let go of the break caused by shame and fear?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
It's a big question.
yeah, it is, and it's a nice question. So thank you for that. And the first thing I have to think about is Steve Poulter, the writer of the book, whom I personally know have become to know in the past years, because I translated 3 of his books,
Yes.
and we built up a personal relationship. And Steve always says, shame is the monster in your closet, which, when you open the closet and you turn on the light, appears to be an old yellow plastic raincoat. So shame is an illusion, and it is an illusion which originates from the early childhood messages, mainly implicit messages, but sometimes also explicit messages, where we internalize the idea that if we do such and such, we will be rejected and maybe found not good enough.
Yeah.
So it's the message which is internalized in our brains, in our emotional brain, in our body, that we are not good enough, or we are not worth love, or we are an imposter. And that may be on a specific issue. It may be very broad, it may be very specific, that varies per person. It's a very personal journey everybody makes in this field of shame.
Yeah.
Everybody has it, and it becomes sort of a fire, which is what you have with forest fires, where there under the surface there is a heat wave going on, and if somewhere it is touched upon, it will flame up.
Yeah.
So basically that's what shame is for a lot of people as well. So we all have areas where we have adapted ourselves in our early childhood years, again, to receive these 3 issues: food, physical touch, and
love and
emotional
affection.
affection.
Yeah.
This adaptation process can result in telling ourselves that if we do this and this, we are not good enough. Or if daddy is angry, we are not good enough. Or if our parents divorce, it is our fault and we are not good enough. So this is basically the pattern which starts quite innocent, But if nobody talks about it with us, it starts to grow and grow and grow.
And it amplifies.
It amplifies. It's like a cancer. It's
Yeah.
also what Walter says. It's a cancer, an
Yeah.
emotional cancer,
Yeah.
because shame inflicts shame.
Yeah.
So shame also leads us to do things which shame us.
Yeah.
So, for instance, a lot of addictions, being it social media addiction on the phone, until sexual addictions, drinking, maybe also doing things like jumping off mountains on a cord,
Yeah,
on an
some
elastic
high
cord,
risk.
high risk sports.
Yeah.
It may be addictions to avoid pain and to prove ourselves that we're good enough,
Yeah.
but are basically driven by shame pattern. And the more shaming these addictions are, and the more our environment says that addictions are shameful, we will amplify, and it will start hurting us. It will be harmful.
Yeah.
So shame is a monster with a lot of heads,
Yeah.
and
And it keeps popping up.
it keeps popping up, and there's no pill against it. There's no cure other than practicing vulnerability, practicing to talk about it, to reach out to secure bases,
Yeah.
and to share the shame facts,
Yeah.
share, and then starting to practice to first of all try to understand where it comes from. That's, I think, important to understand yourself and where does my shame exist from, where is it originated, and is it my shame? Maybe it's not my shame.
Yeah. Yeah, there's intergenerational
Yeah.
things that we pass on
Yeah.
to children
Well,
and that we take from our parents.
I can tell you, my father was intellectually capable to do university,
Yeah.
but he came from a poorer family, so he couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
His parents couldn't afford it. He didn't go to university.
Yeah.
He always wanted to finish university and never ended it, never finished it. So the idea of wanting something and never finishing it was one of his shaming issues.
Yeah.
He didn't like to talk about it, but
Yeah.
it was there.
So it was a topic that you
found-
couldn't really talk
I
about.
found that I was doing the same.
Yeah.
I found that I was also in the pattern of starting up, not finishing things and shaming about it, and then starting something new in order to forget and
Yeah.
So
And then
this
not
pattern
finish
of-
that again.
Yeah.
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 So it's also an intergenerational issue, and that's also why one of the things I do with people is go back and find out whether it's your issue, it's not your issue. If it's not your issue, give it back.
Yeah.
You can symbolically give it back to the person you got it from.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And I use rituals to do that. So making rituals in our lives is important to do mourning and to do grieving and to intertwine our losses in our lives.
Yeah.
So the same goes with shame, because shame is also a loss of. The basis is a loss of something.
Yeah.
The loss of a piece of your own identity. So it's also about getting free of shame is also regaining your own identity.
Yes.
Because your shaming makes that you do things because you think that people around you expect you to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're good enough.
Exactly. And they will reject you for not being good enough. So
That's
ultimately,
the fear. That's
yes.
the fear. If they do it or not, it's.
Of course, that's the fear that drives
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
to keep acting from behind the mask instead of showing up.
Yeah.
And as you said, being vulnerable.
Yeah.
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 So the cure to shame is understanding where it comes from, and practicing to be vulnerable first towards secure bases,
Yeah.
and then also practicing just in general to in a meeting, for instance. One of the things I've always been very which wondered me was in a meeting, and I myself I was guilty as well, as hell sometimes. Not talking out, not saying, hey, wait, we're talking about the bush, we're running about the bush here.
Yeah.
We have to talk about this issue, this is what happens, and nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Hey, we discussed the planning, nobody has kept to the planning. Why not?
Yeah.
And what we do is talk around it, and then and practicing to say, okay, it makes me angry that we're not keeping to schedule.
Yeah.
What happens? That's a question we've find sometimes hard to ask. And practicing to do that, also as a leader, instead of saying, okay, anybody else with around questions?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to work.
Yeah.
It's-
But again, there is the fear of being rejected.
Mhm.
Because if we speak out, we might be judged for it, or
Yeah.
we might be the own.
Yeah.
Most of the times, everyone is thinking it, nobody's saying it.
Yeah.
But we don't dare to risk
Yeah.
saying it in many
Yeah,
cases.
and they are the leader. That's also why leadership is so important. Leaders should set the example that it's okay
Yes.
to take this risk,
yeah,
and it's not. It is
Yeah.
not a reason for rejection if
Yeah.
you fail or say something stupid, or
yeah,
that it's okay that you may practice. That it's something to learn together.
yeah,
And there's also one of the issues of shame and father and mother factor is perfectionism.
yeah,
And that's also in our current society. What you see is the positive end result. The route towards the positive end result and all this shit and what it's cost is, well, it isn't shown on YouTube. It isn't shown on Insta.
No.
So it's not there.
yeah. We think it's not
We
there.
think.
Yeah.
We think.
But we know.
But we know it is.
Yeah.
No, well, but we start to forget that it is.
Well, yeah, because we're bombarded with the other
Yeah,
side.
so perfectionism
Yeah.
is not being allowed to fail, and well, that can also be addictive. Trying to avoid failure.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I think all the escapes, we can completely get lost in it sufficiently enough so that we don't have to think about that part that we actually have to face. Yeah. I think, and we've touched upon this, I think shame relates a lot to the inability to accept ourselves. That we are, the thought that we are wrong or something is wrong, and it often has to do with the relation to other people. I'm interested because if you think about fear, actually I've kind of adopted a way in my life personally to now actively seek out or actively engage with my fear and do the things that I fear. So my relationship to fear has changed where for me it has now become kind of a signal, okay, here's an opportunity to learn, here's an opportunity to grow. And thus I engage with it and I do those things
Yeah.
that I fear. Is there something similar, kind of a way that we can pivot shame and turn it into something that pushes us forward or that moves us forward?
Yeah, first of all, I think the move you talk about is, well, if you look at attachment, there's a number of attachment moves people make. So I normally use the example of a father or a mother who learns his kid to ride a bike.
Mm-hmm.
So the kid falls. Inevitably it falls.
Yeah.
What does father or mother do? Does he say or she say, "Don't cry, come on, don't be a sissy, come on"?
Mm-hmm.
That's the dominant version, which is insecure, because the kid is not accepted in his grief and his pain.
Yeah.
And well, you may be very sure that father and mother feel they are not good enough if they cannot learn the child to ride a bike without falling.
Yeah. And it becomes about them instead of the
Yeah.
child. Yeah.
That's it. So the insecure version of dominance is a move you can make when you are confronted with risk.
Yeah.
The other one is, well, maybe you're too small. Let's put the bike away for a couple of months and then we'll see again.
Try again. Yeah.
What you do is also insecure because you are too caring.
Yeah.
You basically take away the responsibility from the kid
Yeah.
and tell the kid it's not capable.
Yeah.
The third version is, that hurts, huh? Shall I give a kiss? Is the bike okay? Shall we try it again?
Yeah.
Because I trust you can do it.
Yeah.
And the more you learn as a kid that is the way to act towards fearful things, the more you learn to step out and to experience that fear is something in your head,
Yes.
and it's basically not based on what will happen in real life.
And that's the resilience. Yeah.
That's resilience. And what you can see is that people can learn in a later phase of their life, if they are grown up in an insecure attachment environment.
Mm-hmm.
They can learn to attach in a safe way, but they need secure bases
Yeah.
who help them from a caring and daring stance.
Yeah.
And if you learn that failure or falling is not the end of the world, then you can learn to take risk more than you have learned in your previous attachment history.
Yes.
So in Dutch we call it verworven hechting. I don't know what it's in English, but it's
acquired.
Acquired or regained attachment.
Yeah.
And it's about regained safe attachment instead of unsafe attachment.
Yeah.
So basically, I think that going beyond your fear is, you will always find out that the hurdle, that's also what I say to my coaches, see the hurdle as a stepping stone from which you see the world from another point of view.
But then when we apply this to shame, how can we?
Yeah, well, that's also talking about shame, talking about the fact that you are afraid that somebody will come in and say that you are not the right person for the job, that you're an imposter. If you talk to a safe person about the fear you feel, you will find out that the fear is diminishing.
Yeah.
So the shame is diminishing. So shame evaporates. Well, you could say it melts down. If you
When it comes out into the open.
If you put sun on snow, it will melt.
Yeah.
And this will happen. That's also why Polter says, open the cabinet, put on the light, and you will find out that it's only a raincoat.
Yeah.
So by taking the risk of being vulnerable, you will find out that shame becomes less and less influential on your life.
Yeah.
And it's about, and there I will link to one of the previous interviews you did and blogs you wrote. It's also about calm state of mind.
Yes.
So what shame does, it's inflammatory.
Yeah.
Or
it is inflammatory.
It's explosive.
Yes.
So what it does, it ignites your primary emotional system.
Yeah.
So it originates a flight-fight reaction.
Exactly. I just want to say. Yeah.
So it's a physical reaction as well.
Yeah.
You can feel it in your. That's also why I said shame is also incorporated in your body, not only in an emotional brain,
Yeah.
also in your body. Because if something shameful happens, your body reacts. You can feel it in your stomach, or
you heat up, you start to sweat,
or your throat is being, well, whatever. And also being calm helps you reduce this flight-fight modus.
Yeah.
So what helps people who are suffering from shameful shame cycles, is to help them to learn to meditate, to use physical exercise or ways of relaxing the body.
Yes.
In order to be able to also relax the hormone system in the body.
Yes.
Because we know that as soon as your reptile brain is being set to work, adrenaline will get into your body, and a lot of neurotransmitting hormones are released, which will help your body to concentrate, make muscles active, get blood flows different from your digestion is cut off, so everything is set for flight or fight. The hormone cortisol is bringing that down, and it takes about 10 seconds. If you don't move and you just stay breathing and try not to get emotionally hijacked by your amygdala, then your amygdala calms down and your body calms down, and the hormones are reduced by the amount of cortisol your kidney produces, and then kidney is not the kidney, it's the nier, the bijnier.
Kidney. Nier is
kidney. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so cortisol is produced and your hormones are quieted down, and it takes about 10 to 15 seconds. So if you learn that if shame comes up, you can stay breathing and you are not hijacked.
You can prevent from being hijacked.
Yeah,
by the shame.
Yeah, and you can practice yourself to remain calm.
Yeah.
And as soon as basically this hijack system is eliminated again,
Yeah.
then your thinking brain will work again.
Yeah.
Because in this flight-fight modus, your neocortex won't work properly.
Yeah.
So your logic is not working.
It's an interesting point because not the last post, but the one before, I've interviewed Isabel Bester about resilience, and what she shared, and this is really fascinating, that if we, I want to say it right, I might be wrong on the number, but if we experience stress for 1 minute, or emotional distress, or this fight, flight, and freeze reaction, which is caused by shame, it takes us a factor 60. So it takes us 1 hour to come back from it. That means if we have a stressful experience of 8 minutes, it's cost us 8 hours, almost an entire day, if we don't regulate
To
it.
really recover it.
Exactly. And if we indeed, as you also say, allow it and calm down and go through it, experience it. We've talked about it before with the bowl, and we have to go through the experience in order to become free from it.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, a very interesting and important realization, hopefully for many, because if we don't go through it, it keeps draining us and keeps taking our energy.
Yeah.
And we keep being actually away from ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So freedom is not about walking around the pain. Freedom is found beyond the pain.
Yeah.
And you have to
Through
go
the pain.
it, through the pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. I would also love to ask you about the book, because as I mentioned, it's still in transit in traffic. I believe it's coming only this Saturday. Can you share, just, we've talked about it briefly prior, the three main elements of the book. Can you take us through the book?
Mhm.
And what I would also love to hear is from you personally, what was your biggest insight or your biggest takeaway from the book, The Shame Factor?
Yeah, well, the shame factor as well as the father and mother factor have been built around three parts. The first part is about recognizing what is it? What is the shame factor? And the shame factor is, in one or two sentences, is the perception you have gained in your early years about what you have to do to be felt good enough, and all other will help you develop shameful cycles.
Yeah.
So it is about your perception, it is not about the message. Family systems help to get this message across, because if you have a family system which is very output oriented, so you have a career tiger father, you have a perfectionist mother, the chance will be that you will find shame on different areas than somebody who grows up in a fatherless family,
Yeah.
where there's only a mother and father is not emotionally or physically available.
Yeah.
So the family system helps you in what type of shame you might develop.
Yeah.
But it's not it's a starting point, it's not the end point. And shame is about an internalized idea based on explicit or implicit messages.
Yeah.
The second part, which Polter does, is say, okay, if we know what shame is, then what is it to you? What is your shame factor, and what are the effects on your life? And he works through a number of issues which go from basically the idea of being an imposter through to serious aggression. A lot of
Which is
in
another
America-
coping mechanism.
Yeah, in America you have a lot of shootings which are acts of aggression, but also in traffic, aggression is very often shame related.
Yeah.
So he takes us through all various forms of expression of shame, and helps you recognize, hey, which one is for me, which one is applies to me.
Yeah.
Even addictions, which is addiction to work, is one of the most
Common response.
responses to
Yeah.
shame. but also in relationships, not talking to your partner and starting to do sports every night in order not to have a discussion with your partner about what's not working between the two of you.
Yeah, yeah,
So the second part is about what is shame to you, and the third part is about how to deal with it and how to get rid of it, and how to find freedom.
yeah,
And there you find the three issues we talked about: being able to start talking to a secure base about shame, being able to open the closet in front of somebody else, not alone, because that won't work. You will have
no,
to.
you have to.
You have to
There has
have-
to be a witness.
There has to be a witness,
Yes.
which is safe to you,
Yeah, yeah,
and then practicing to tell yourself new stories, and practicing to be calm and have a he tells an eagle view of your life.
yeah.
He talks about the owl view, which is the cognitive view,
Mm-hmm.
the reptile view, which is from your reptile brain,
Yeah.
and the eagle view, where you
From above.
from practicing calmness can be able to oversee and to feel, okay, this is shameful. My body responds. Okay, so what do I do next? Okay, I tell my wife this happens again. Or I call a friend and say, well, you know, I really feel the urge to start smoking again. Please tell me that it's okay if I don't.
So it's about those moments where you are in a fragile state, perhaps, that you own up to it and make it visible and share it with others. And as we talked before we started the interview, where there's someone who holds the space, and thereby, provides a safe space for you to express these things. That sets you free from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a journey. It's not
Sure.
a one-time
Yeah.
project. It's a journey.
Yeah.
So what happens to me, for instance, and you said what is your biggest nugget from the book,
Mm-hmm.
is to really acknowledge my own shame patterns,
Yeah.
and to be able to say to my wife. So for instance, what happens? I have to write an article, and well, writing means that you have to put something in the world, and you won't know what happens to it.
Yes.
So it sometimes fears me to, and I don't think it's good enough, or even tell myself who is waiting for me,
Yeah.
who is interested in what I have to say.
So recognizable.
So, and it, you know, it's getting less and less, but sometimes it flames up again, and
Yeah.
I have to, and my wife sees it, says, it's there again, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we are now in a situation where I can say, yeah, that's why I'm so quiet now.
Yeah.
So thank you for asking, and this is happening.
Yeah.
So this and this is what I'm fearing, and yeah, it's there again.
Yeah.
And as soon as I do that with her, or when I call a friend and say, you know, one of my the guy who I've translated the Father Factor with, Marnix, is a good friend of me, and I can call him anytime and say, Marnix, you know, I'm afraid this and this is happening,
Yeah.
and I feel it again, and that helps me to lengthen the period that it will happen again, because it becomes less and less intrusive in my life.
Yes. Yes.
So that's the biggest nugget I feel, that being able to practice, because I know where my shame is.
Yeah. Yeah, I recognize this very much, and I had to laugh because I was thinking of the first interview that I did for this project, because actually I've been recording everything on camera, and I'm putting myself out there, and also my writing, I mean, some of it is quite personal.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of doing it also as a form, perhaps, of self-therapy. I don't know. I mean, there's an element of curiosity, but that's also a part where maybe the therapeutic part is to actually put it out there and risk being rejected. And I had to laugh because my first interview, I mean, it was unpractical, because we went for a walk in the forest while we did the interview, and that's the only interview where there's no video, but there's only an audio recording. And I think at that time, because on my birthday, June 15 in the morning, I recorded that video explaining the project, basically. And I was very self-conscious to put that out there for the world to see, and I think on the first post I wasn't yet ready to actually record a video also, and just to have the world to see it. And it's also interesting that through this time it was kind of a good practice to just every time put it out there. And I mean, it's been great, because I've got really beautiful feedback. I mean, it helped me but it also helped some other people along the way. It's been good. But actually, as you said, the shame kind of, and the fear as well, it just dissolved as
Yeah.
snow in the sun. Yeah.
So psychological safety is not generated by avoiding risk.
No.
It's generated by taking risk.
Yes.
And finding out that it's okay.
Yeah. And that even when we are rejected, because obviously I've been rejected a gazillion times for approaching people who didn't have time for an interview or who never responded or whatever, and that's also okay.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things I learned my coachees. Every relation is a game of tennis.
Yeah.
So you know the game of tennis.
Yes.
We have a field, we have a net in the middle, you have a racket, I've got a racket, and we've got a ball. And we start passing each other the ball.
Yeah.
What do we do in relationships? We walk around the net and start playing on the other one's field to help him, save him. He's not good enough to do it alone, so I have to do it because otherwise it goes wrong.
Yeah. It will go wrong anyway, so let me do it.
Reasons
Yeah.
why we feel the need, the urge to walk around the net.
Yeah.
And we do two things. We don't take care of our own life, which is our own part of the field,
Yes.
and we take away the responsibility
Of
for the other person
Yes.
to take care of his or her life.
Yeah.
In any relationship, you can see the tennis field,
Yeah.
and the what you have to practice as a human being to become more and more shame-free, more and more your own identity, is to learn to stay on your own field, and leaving your own field starts with the idea, maybe I shouldn't tell him that today because maybe it's not the right time to tell him this.
Yeah.
So it's not only practically doing things around the net, but also thinking things around the net, and that's what we do all the time.
All the time. Yes.
Maybe I should tell this tomorrow. Maybe he's not in a good mood.
Yeah. I might be
Fuck it.
rejected.
Yeah,
That's the
because
thing. Yeah.
what we think is we start thinking for the other person,
Yes.
and we cannot tell what his reaction is until we have heard it, and it's
Exactly.
his reaction.
Yes.
It's not our reaction. So if I tell you I really hate this interview, it says something about me and not about you.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do is say, okay, tell me. What do you want to tell me more?
Yeah.
And be curious, and maybe it's something you can change.
Yeah.
But you learn that if you stay on your side of the field
Yeah.
and ask over the net, hey, what's happening? What's happening between us?
Yeah.
Can I help you?
And-
Do you need anything?
And don't make your experience mean something about me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You missed the ball.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
The ball's out.
It's a very good metaphor. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things we also have to learn, because that's also one of the coping mechanisms we learn very early, to postpone things or not to say things because we are afraid that the other person may not like it,
Yeah.
or we are thinking that the other person reacts negatively and make it our own.
Yes.
Negative reaction. It's
Yeah.
not our reaction. It's his reaction,
Yeah.
her reaction.
Yeah. It's a great point that we have to stay on our side of the net. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And try
Which we-
not to take onto our plate what is not ours.
Yes. I've talked with Professor Bitter about this, the division of tasks,
Yeah.
and it's critical. We take on other people's tasks which are not our own.
Yeah.
We do that way too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the boat in the sense
Wu
that
Wei.
yes, because that's the boat
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what got us connected. Interestingly enough,
Yeah.
and that's what got us here. Can you tell me first, why did you name the boat Wu Wei? I mean, I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear.
Mhm.
And also what Wu Wei means for you, and what it meant in your life, even so much that you named the boat after it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, what it means, it's a Taoist term.
Yes,
It's Chinese.
yes,
And it's old Chinese, and it says basically, literally, it says, "Do not interfere,"
Yeah.
or "no action."
yeah,
It's not about being lethargic. It's about not interfering with the flow of nature, basically.
yeah,
So Taoism is a naturalist not religion. I wouldn't call it a religion. I would call it a way of life or a life vision or a philosophy, which is very much connected to nature and sees human beings as part of nature.
Yeah.
And has the idea that nature takes its flow, the Tao, the way, the going of things, and we cannot fight against the going of things. We have to accept what comes on our path.
Mm-hmm.
But what we can do is do the best thing we can do with what comes to our path.
Mm.
So the concept of Wu Wei is, there's also a concept of Wu Nengzi,
Yes.
which is about not knowing.
Yeah.
And these two form for me the center of my ability to be a leader and a coach. It comes from the idea that when I was a kid, I learned about the role of the Catholic Church in the Second World War. I already mentioned the Second World War was quite present in our family system.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really disgusted, so I shut the church door behind me. I was not baptized. I don't know whether you call that in the Catholic Church, but okay, we
Gedoopt.
gedoopt,
Yeah.
yeah, and I did my communion, etc. So I was a Catholic, but I slammed the door closed behind me, like my father and my grandfathers did. So I also followed the male family line. And I started to look for other I'm a spiritual being, so I started to find other ways of spirituality which fitted for me.
Yes.
And I came
Some form
towards-
of guidance, assistance.
yeah, and the idea that there is I have the idea that I am part of something bigger,
Mm.
and that this bigger thing is also inside me and I'm connected to it. And I don't know where the idea comes from, but so I found it in Taoism. I did a lot of Zen meditation.
Mm.
So Zen and Taoism were basically the philosophies where I found myself comfortable with.
Yes.
And I find nowadays that the idea of Jesus being somebody who is also a secure base is and acting from love is very much overlapping with the Taoist idea that love is the source of everything. So now at my age, I'm finding that I'm getting back to the idea that it's okay to have both as a guidance.
Yes.
But the idea of and it's also with the boat. You have to accept the wind. You have to accept the tides. You have to accept what happens to you.
Yeah.
You get into an adventure. You don't know what happens.
Yeah.
As soon I untie the lines, it's gonna be different than
There's the elements.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be different than the time before.
Yeah.
And I can't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I have to accept what happens, and I have to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So that's for me Wu Wei, and that's also why I call the boat Wu Wei.
Yeah. It's extra fitting, obviously, on a sailing boat. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Also, on a motor yacht, it's basically the same. When something can break down there, and you can drift
Yeah. Yeah.
motorless, you'll have to find your way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it fits very much when you have to depend on the sail.
Yeah.
And the idea of Wu Nengzi and Wu Wei together are for me in my leadership and in my work as a coach, the idea that it allows me to hold space without having to judge, without having to know the solution, just by being curious and listening to my body and to my intuition, which question comes up. So if I have, as a leader but also as a coach, when I've experienced that I have to start working emotionally, I try to breathe and to sit still and to listen to what question comes up, and without thinking about it, just asking this question, and it normally is the right question.
Yeah.
So
there's a big element of trust there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
trust in myself, in myself being connected to something
Yes.
bigger,
Yeah.
which is helping me to. So the idea of Wu Wei and Wu Nengzi is about trusting that the Tao will give you the answer.
Yeah.
If you look at it, my belief is that what Christians say, if we have Christ in our midst, when we are 2 or more people together, Christ is in our midst, and He will tell us something. And whether it's Christ or not, it doesn't matter. But what happens in the energy is that something will come up as long as you allow it to.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that mostly the right thing will come up if you allow it to.
Yeah. If you don't force it.
No, if you don't
Yeah.
force it.
Yeah.
If you don't go into the flow of nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's basically the idea, which is, and of course knowledge is good, planning is good. It's not about eradicating everything which is logical or has to do with our neocortex brain.
Yeah.
Or my left part of my brain. It's about knowing this and so all the context which I can tell you about shame, etc. It's all there. But if I'm working with you as a coachee, I will not go about the context. I will tell me where you come from. And if you say this is my problem, can you tell me a bit more? And just leave it there and let it arise and let it come up from not knowing, from not having the answer, from not being forced to solve your problem.
And being okay with that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
being okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Wu Wei is about inexertion, not putting in strain. It's about inaction or effortless action.
Yeah.
It's also about an unconflicting, and I like this really, an unconflicting personal harmony.
Yeah, I would call it a unconditional positive regard.
Yeah, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And spontaneity, so flowing free spontaneity. As you say, when you let go of the ropes from the dock, you just have to see what happens and go with it.
Yeah.
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 It's also about letting go of tension.
Yeah.
And I believe that forceful tension and the pushing things and driving, they often actually work against us. And this whole concept of Wu Wei and kind of riding the wave is a very interesting concept for me also to experience. At the same time, and here's the question, what is the part, or how does it relate to persistence and to discipline? Because we also need that.
Yeah. So you can, I think there's 2 ways where you can, so there's the forceful way of trying to achieve things where the father, mother and shame factor are involved.
Yeah.
So proving yourself to the rest of the world, proving that you're good enough, doing things because you have learned to do so in your family system. So, or trauma-related issues which are pushing you to do as you do. So that's one way to look at it, and the other way is about forming your identity and trying to find what is your calling, which helps you to discipline yourself.
Yeah, but then it's not a discipline, but it kind of becomes a pulling.
Yeah, and discipline, if you look at the word disciple, is follower.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
discipline is not about it's not
interesting.
about pushing, but is about following.
I love that you say that. Actually, what I'm seeing with my training, for instance, because I'm doing a lot of training, obviously for the Ironman race, and people comment and say, "Oh, I really appreciate your discipline that you put into this." And I think at the start there was an element of discipline, but over time it also just becomes a habit, and it kind of is just it pulls me into the training almost, and it yeah. So the discipline and I like that it's about a disciple. We're following, instead of pushing.
Yeah, and what are we following? Are we following the narrative of what we have learned, or did we free ourselves enough to be able to say, okay, who am I, and what do I want to achieve in the world or bring into the world, and can we follow that path?
Yes.
And then following that path is about, well, disciplining to do what we. So, if I have my calling, I have to accept that not everything which I'm good at or which I'm asked to do is fitting into the path of my calling.
Yeah.
So I have to discipline myself to say no sometimes.
Yes.
Because if I do that, I get distracted from what I think is what I have to do.
Yeah.
And saying no to what I can do very well, and which here can please people and make me loved in a certain group. So for instance, I was asked to be a secretary of a rugby club lately, and I fit in the team. I think I can do it with my brain and with my heart. I love rugby as a sport. I love the club, and still I felt it didn't fit enough with what I really have to do.
Yeah.
It would take away a lot of energy
Yeah.
of what I think I have to do in the world.
Yeah.
So I had to say no, which was also causing, and I felt it again. Do I belong? If I say no, do I still belong?
Yeah.
Or am I rejected?
Yeah.
So
Or
the-
will you be rejected? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the fear of being rejected
Yes.
also came. So
Yeah.
taking again the fork, the easy way of
Say
pleasing,
yes. Yeah.
or sometimes the more difficult way of following my passion,
Yeah.
disciplining myself
Yeah.
to follow my passion,
Yeah. Maybe it's. I think passion is
or calling.
calling. Yeah.
Calling.
That's what I would
I
say.
have to say calling, and calling is
Yeah.
a combination of passion and
Yeah.
well,
Passion and purpose.
Purpose,
There's the
yeah.
element of
Yeah,
purpose, I
purpose.
think. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. When we talk about Wu Wei, what element can we take, or what concept or concepts, what element can we take from Wu Wei with regard to helping us release the inner break? Is there something that stands out in that regard? And we've lost flow a little bit,
Yeah,
because
so
the camera just
so I
died
have
for a
to-
moment.
So I have to get back to where I was
Yes.
thinking when you asked the question the first time.
Yeah. I think one important part is to bring us back, perhaps, is the element of trusting in our own abilities to find
Mhm.
the right path, but also from the environment or the universe, if you will, with which we are all connected, that we are getting the right pointers in the right times. And that has to do with trust and accepting that we have to maneuver with what is
Yeah.
and what's
Yeah.
presented.
Yeah, so I think that's the most important thing for me. The concept of Wu Wei was about accepting that I cannot influence everything, so I have to accept what comes on my path.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my inspiring psychologists in this world is Edith Eva Eger. I don't know whether you know her
No.
name. She is a Holocaust survivor, and she wrote the book The Choice. And one of the things she says is that Auschwitz was a playground for me, a learning school. Playground is a bit too, but a learning school, because I learned that I was not a victim. I had done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
The guards were the victims
Yeah.
of the system,
Yeah.
and they could never touch me in my emotions and in my brain.
Yeah.
My thoughts and my brain are mine, and I have the choice not to influence what happens to me, but I have the choice
How we react, how we
to
respond.
react or respond to it.
Yeah.
And I think that is what Wu Wei is about as well. Is about
Mm.
accepting that the world brings things to your path. The world is not a nice place.
Yeah.
The terrible things happen in the world, and still every person has his own right and ability to. So also in relation to leadership and coaching, I find that I am not. I can attribute to every person his ability and his right to take responsibility of his own life and over his own choices he makes in response to what happened to him
Yes.
or her. So taking away somebody's responsibility or allowing somebody to take full responsibility of what he does and thinks and feels is also an area where Wu Wei helps me to not interfere,
Yeah.
to not be judgmentary, to allow someone to be, well, I talked about unconditional positive regard.
Yes. Yeah.
Unconditional is without any judgment, allowing somebody to be who he is with
Yeah.
every shit he has,
Yeah.
with everything he's done, and then, like a lawyer who says, I believe that everybody has a right to be defended,
Yeah.
disregarded of what he has done.
Yeah.
Even a murderer needs to be able to be defended. So I think also a murderer deserves the right to take responsibility of his own doings and reactions to what happens to him.
Yeah.
I don't have to judge him. I can think something about the practical thing he's done, but he's still a human, and about his humanity, I can't judge.
Yeah. I think an element that I'd like to add, it's an important part to be free from judgment, obviously towards the others that we engage with, but also towards ourselves, because there's also a big element of judgment of our own actions and our own thoughts and our own motivations at times.
Yeah.
And if we can free ourselves from those judgments, then actually we are much more able to be in touch with this principle of Wu Wei and to go with whatever is happening without interference
That's
of
true.
judgment of the others, but also of ourselves.
That's true. Yeah.
And I love the example. I don't know her, but I'll be definitely reading her book. I greatly enjoyed the book of Viktor Frankl.
Frankl, yeah.
Obviously, similar message.
Yeah.
And The Happiest
Yeah.
Man on Earth. I forgot his name at the moment, but it's a similar story, and they're all very much. I mean, they've been in the worst of conditions, and they still have been actually the most powerful beings in those conditions. And a big part of it was the social element, the connection with others, and the shared purpose.
Yeah, and a connection to a purpose. That's basically what divides Frankl from Agar.
Yeah.
Frankl has said, okay, everybody can survive the most terrible circumstances as long as he can connect to a purpose,
Yes.
to a goal,
Yeah.
to something which is bigger than he himself.
Yes.
Agar basically does the same, but is focusing more on the ability to choose for yourself, disregard of the situation.
Yeah.
And she's not so much talking about purpose, but about being free to choose.
Yeah.
But they are aligned, and they
Yeah.
are also next of kin in regard to their experiences. But
Yes.
also, I think also Agar met Frankl or worked for him or whatever. Or she's at least connected to his work.
Yeah.
So they are very much aligned, and I completely agree that the concept of Wu Wei is also about freeing yourself from judgment, and there comes the shame factor
Yes.
again.
Yes. Very much.
So we are back on where we started.
The circle is
Yeah, well,
almost round.
yeah.
Well, apart from one question which I always ask at the end of these talks, which is, I mean, we've talked about many things with regard to shame, fear, Wu Wei, and in general, releasing our inner brakes. What question about this didn't I ask? What angle did I miss? I mean, there's so many questions, but is there something that comes to mind that you think, that would have been interesting or important to address? And if so, what is it? What comes to mind?
I think we covered a lot. We covered the body and the responses in our body to
Yes.
maybe what we touched upon lightly is the fact that spirituality is important. So the concept of Wu Wei is important for me, and I think that we are all we are cognitive beings we are emotional beings which can think by fortune.
Yeah.
We have cognition, but we also have a spiritual need. And what I think in general in leadership, and I think in general, what you see is the church is getting empty and more empty and more empty. And on the other hand, the need for spiritual experiences is high. So what I would think is that we may also think about the concept of Wu Wei as and there are many other ways in which you can experience your spiritual self, art, music, and which I use also in my coaching, a lot of music and poetry, because I think that touching upon the ethical and spiritual part of ourselves is also a way to release shame. One of the things we are going to do, I told you about this congress we have in September.
Yes.
Apart from talking about the issue of shame and how to get rid of it, we also work with the body. So we also have a number of workshops which are about working with the body and working with music and art in order to free ourselves from also the shame about moving about.
Yes.
So
about singing and
yeah.
We have a lot of inhibiting
connecting
factors.
ourselves to what is bigger than we.
Yeah.
In communion, because where people are together and they work on, so look at how it works when you have a church singing together, like the Baptist Church in America.
Yeah.
It's incredible what happens.
Yes.
Whether or not you believe it is not interesting, but it's beautiful.
But
how
the
people
element
get
of singing
connect.
together is wonderful.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of ways in which spirituality can be used to connect people, to make a secure base where people can come back to rest, and also again to reach out again
and show more of themselves, be more of themselves, and have less of a mask. Yeah, it's a very good addition. Yeah. Well, Michiel, I want to thank you, and I very much appreciate this talk, and it's been a wonderful journey, and I think it's a beautiful closure to have it with you here on the boat, Wu Wei, in person, not behind a screen. This is also very good. So it had to be. This is actually Wu Wei in practice, because the pushing in me wanted to schedule you for the previous deadline, as you know, but you clearly said no, there's no time, and that was the fear in me of, I will not make this deadline. I'll be rejected for it. Just making it flat.
Yeah.
But actually, it resulted in me connecting with Bitter, Professor Bitter, James, Jim, as I may call him now. I'm meeting him in August, and it was also it's great how things just fall in place, and that's also, I guess, Wu Wei in the flesh, because of you saying no, and now this being the last recording, I was able to have the recording with him and the conversation that we had, and also where it led me, and it's been it's been a wonderful experience. I appreciate you for being part of it. I want to shake hands because we can do that in person now.
Well, congratulations on your birthday.
Coming up June 15th.
And on concluding this journey, because it's been a hell of a ride.
It has been a hell of a ride, but I'm very happy that I've taken it.
Thank you so much for finishing it here with me.
Yes.
And it feels also, after having read a lot of the articles, it also feels like a sort of wrap up.
Yes.
There's a lot of things which come together.
Yes.
So for maybe it feels
no,
the same for
it
you.
feels the same, and also that's why I think it's so fitting. I mean, obviously we're always looking to release the brake and be our full and free selves, and I think in that sense it's also a nice closing topic to close this project and later on close the book with, where we just release the brakes, hopefully with some of the tools and some of the topics that came up, and then actually just be our full selves.
I wish that everybody, I wish I could give that to everybody.
Yes.
That's, I think, what would help the world to be a better place.
Very much.
And that's also what your idea was, 39 ideas
Absolutely, yeah.
to make the world a better place.
Yes.
So congratulations on that.
And do it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for being a part of it. Very much
so much.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
And towards the viewers and listeners, I really appreciate all of you. With some of you, I've been in touch. Obviously, also the people that I've been interviewing for this. 39 very, very interesting people. I've learned so much, and it's just been a great journey. So thank you, and to be continued in some other form or shape.